Namaskar and welcome back viewers. You're with me Surbhi Unial and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. We are doing a series on aesthetics, which is a branch of philosophy. In a previous lecture, we discussed what the term aesthetic means, what are the aims and objectives of aesthetics, or what is the subject matter of aesthetics. We also discussed what is an aesthetic object and what is an aesthetic experience. With that background, let us now move on to one of the most fundamental principles in aesthetic, which is that of the idea of beauty. So beauty is a fundamental principle explored within the field of aesthetics. It poses intriguing questions regarding the nature and whether it possesses an objective or subjective essence. We ask questions like, what is beauty? Is beauty an objective or subjective value? So why do we talk about, let me just go back again and try to relate it here. When we are doing an aesthetic appreciation or having an aesthetic experience, we often say that something is beautiful, that the painting is beautiful, that the dance is beautiful, or the music is beautiful, or even a natural scene is beautiful. If we are saying that something is beautiful, what does the term beauty here refers to? Is this beauty an objective value or is it a subjective value? So even when considering beauty as a subjective assessment, various perspectives can be employed to contemplate its meaning. Fine. So many believe that beauty, it is a subjective assessment. So what might look beautiful to me might not look beautiful to you. So from that context, many philosophers have argued that beauty is a subjective assessment. But even while talking about beauty being a subjective assessment, there are various perspectives that can be employed here to contemplate the meaning of what do we really mean by subjective assessment in beauty. So our judgments of beauty completely in the eye of the beholder, as the popular phrase indicates. Or are there criterias or patterns that determine individuals' responses? So this is a very famous phrase which I'm sure most of you must have heard and even used in your life, that when somebody appreciates you, you often say that the beauty lies in the eye of the beholder and it's not really in me, but in fact it's in you. Since you are appreciating me and you are the one observing me, so the beauty lies in you and not me. What do we mean here? Philosophically, evaluating this phrase means that we are saying that it is a subjective assessment. So somebody in whose eye the beauty lies would see things as beautiful, while the other in whose eyes the beauty isn't prevalent, that person might not see something to be as beautiful. So the question that arises here is that, is it purely subjective, or whether we have certain criterias or patterns that will determine our responses towards certain things and that will make us appreciate something to be aesthetically beautiful because of certain patterns and criterias. Or is beauty merely arbitrary? Okay, or can we uncover a framework that elucidates our encounters with it? So one of the fundamental debates surrounding beauty involves, or you can say it revolves around this aspect of objectivity and subjectivity, and this is the most fundamental debate in aesthetics, where we are trying to evaluate that whether beauty is something objective or whether it is purely subjective. So objectivity suggests that beauty exists independently and it is inherent in the object or artwork itself. Fine, so something being objectively present means that it exists independently. So here the beauty is existing independently, that means it is inherent in that object or in that piece of work, and it has nothing to do with the individual's perception or individual's experience of that object, because here the beauty is in the object and not in the subject. So that is known as objectivity in beauty. In contrast, subjectivity asserts that beauty lies within the eyes of the beholder. What does it mean? It means that it relies on the personal preferences, it relies on cultural influences and individuals' experiences. This viewpoint implies that beauty is a subjective judgment, varying from person to person or culture to culture. And this again you might have come across, that what is beautiful or what is seen to be as beautiful in one culture might not be the same in the other culture. Fine, so the cultural influences can also determine your idea of beauty. Fine, then comes my preferences. So I have my own personal preferences due to which I find something to be beautiful and other thing to be ugly or not beautiful. Fine, so this shows that there is no objective or universal beauty that is already prevalent or already present in the object. In fact, the beauty is dependent on the subjective judgment, and therefore it varies from person to person, culture to culture, community to community. Fine. So beauty as a central concept in aesthetics poses a range of intriguing questions, like whether beauty is considered subjective or objective. There are multiple perspectives on how to approach its understanding. While some argue for the complete subjectivity of beauty, while there are others who suggest that there are identifiable criteria or patterns that contribute to our evaluation of the beauty. And in that sense, it's not completely subjective. And I can give you an example here again, that just imagine, let's take an example of Indian classical music. So in Indian classical music, you have to follow certain specified patterns. Fine, so you should, when you are singing a song which is an Indian classical music, there you have to follow those patterns, you have to follow those rules. If you do not follow those patterns and rules, your music would be just a noise. It won't be considered even as a music. So something to be called as a music, and since it is a classical music, being classical means that it is, it has strict rules that we need to follow. So if you don't follow those patterns, and those are objective, you can say objective values that are there in that beauty. So if you don't follow those patterns, if you don't follow those rules, whatever you would sing, it would simply be a noise rather than a music. Fine. So even when you say that I find this piece of music appealing, or I'm enjoying this piece of music, there also with that subjectivity lies a certain aspect of objectivity in the sense of the patterns rules that that make that music to be music. Fine, and that's where you will be able to then from your subjective point of view evaluate it. So it's not purely subjective. Okay, if that noise is produced, you won't be able to appreciate it. So for that subjectivity to arise, there has to be certain sense of objectivity present. So these are some of the debates that are going on in aesthetics, and I have just tried to bring light to those debates. Maybe in our coming up lectures we will discuss various philosophers and their theories, and in that we will see that how they are arguing for these two positions. Now let us talk about how or when did aesthetic as a branch of philosophy emerged. So the study of aesthetics, it dates back to the ancient Greece, where philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle, they pondered upon the questions of beauty and art. Fine. However, aesthetics as a distinct discipline of inquiry, it gained prominence in the 18th century during the Enlightenment era, with the writings of philosophers like Immanuel Kant. So aesthetics as a distinct field, we can say, in philosophy, it emerged during the 18th century, particularly during the Enlightenment era. Prior to this period, discussions of beauty and art were intertwined with other branches of philosophy, such as metaphysics or ethics and epistemology. However, the Enlightenment thinkers sought to establish aesthetics as a separate and specialized area of inquiry. One influential figure that we can say was, who led to the development of aesthetics as a distinct discipline or as a distinct field in philosophy was Alexander Baumgarten. He was a Greek philosopher who coined the term aesthetics in his work Aesthetica. It was published in 1970. So Baumgarten you can say aimed to create a systematic study of sensory perception and its connection to beauty and art. He explained the scope of aesthetics beyond the realm of fine arts and emphasized the importance of sensory perceptions in understanding aesthetic phenomena. Another key figure that I just mentioned in the establishment of aesthetics was this German philosopher Immanuel Kant. So in his influential work, which is the Critique of Judgment, which was published in 1790, he also gave a comprehensive analysis of aesthetic experience and developed a framework of understanding judgments of taste. Now Kant explored the nature of aesthetic judgments, distinguishing it from other forms of judgments, and arguing that aesthetic judgments are based on subjective feelings of pleasure or displeasure rather than objective concepts. Kant's work had a significant impact on subsequent philosophical discussions on aesthetics. It inspired numerous philosophers and artists to explore questions of beauty, taste, and artistic expressions. From the 19th century onwards, aesthetics became a prominent field, attracting philosophers and critics and scholars who sought to understand the nature of art and its relationship to human experience. Now the question that arises here is that is aesthetics synonymous to philosophy of art? So while aesthetics and philosophy of art are closely related, they are not entirely synonymous. Fine, we need to be very careful here. So aesthetic is a broader field that encompasses the study of beauty, taste and nature of aesthetic experiences, including but not limited to art. For example, it mentions about our experiences of breathtaking landscapes or color patterns, in the flower and so on. So it's not just limited to art, but it's a very broader field which includes and which is not just limited to art. Philosophy of art, on the other hand, is a subfield of aesthetics that specifically focuses on philosophical inquiries into the nature, interpretation and evaluation of art. Aesthetic explores questions about beauty, the criteria for judgments, the nature for aesthetic experiences, and the role of art in human life and culture. It investigates not only visual arts but also other forms of aesthetic expressions such as literature, music, theatre, film and architecture. So aesthetics encompasses a wider range of topics beyond art, including natural beauty or aesthetics in everyday life and the philosophical foundations of aesthetic theory. So philosophy of art within the field of aesthetics delves specifically into the philosophical examination of art. It explores questions such as the definition of art, the nature of artistic creativity, the interpretation of artworks, the role of aesthetics in artistic appreciation, the relationship between art and truth, or the ethical issues related to art. So the philosophy of art aims to understand the essence and significance of art, its distinctive qualities and its impact on the individual and the society. Now, having talked about aesthetics and various philosophers within Western philosophy, let us now see whether there has been any theories of aesthetics in our Indian philosophy or not, or if there were, what sort of theories did we have. So the Indian term of aesthetics is often used as Saundarya Shastra. So Saundarya Shastra is an Indian term that translates to the science of beauty or the study of aesthetics. While there is no specific branch of Indian philosophy dedicated solely to Saundarya Shastra, yet the subject matter of aesthetics is prevalent in various ancient Indian literature and the philosophical tradition. Fine, so what we really mean to say here is that the term Saundarya Shastra, or you can say Saundarya Shastra as a different specific branch in Indian philosophy, was not really there, but what we study in aesthetic, what is the subject matter of aesthetic, like beauty, like art, these subject matters, they were already prevalent in various ancient Indian literature or the philosophical traditions as well. One such example is that of the Vedic texts that compare the highest spiritual bliss with the aesthetic enjoyment. So there are traces of art, beauty, aesthetic enjoyments in our ancient Indian literature. So the specific term Saundarya Shastra may have gained prominence in the 20th century as a label for the study of aesthetics in India. However, the subject matter covered under the umbrella of Saundarya Shastra is not fundamentally distinct from the exploration of aesthetics in the Western concept. So, it's not basically, a so-called different context which was there in the Indian context. There have been various overlaps, there have been various similarities that we can find both in the Indian and the Western concepts of aesthetics. So, while the explicit usage of the term may be relatively recent, fine. So, the Saundarya Shastra, the term Saundarya Shastra as as a specific term, that may be relatively recent, yet the inquiry into beauty, into aesthetics and the appreciation of art in Indian literature and philosophy that dates back to ancient times. The concepts and ideas discussed within Saundarya Shastra draws from various diverse sources, including ancient scriptures, literary works, philosophical treatises, and also cultural practices. Fine. So, our basic focus here, or our argument that we are providing here, is to say that though the term or as a specific field, Saundarya Shastra may be relatively new, but the inquiry into those terms, into those concepts, like that of beauty, like that of aesthetics, and the appreciation of art, those can be found in our ancient scriptures, the literary works, in the philosophical treatises as well, and in the cultural practices which are very much prevalent from the ancient times. So, it is important to recognize that there are shared concerns and overlapping themes between Indian and Western aesthetics. Both traditions explore questions about the nature of beauty, the role of art, and the experience of aesthetic pleasure. They also delve into topics such as artistic expressions, interpretation of artworks, and the subjective nature of aesthetic judgment. However, while there are points of convergence, there are also unique aspects within Indian aesthetics that distinguishes it from the Western perspective. Fine, for instance, the concept such as rasa, which focuses on the emotional essence of an aesthetic experience, provide a distinct framework for our understanding of the impact of art, and which is very central to our idea of aesthetic from the Indian concept, which is one of the most important, rasa theory being one of the most important theories in aesthetic from the Indian concept. Additionally, Indian aesthetics, it often emphasizes the spiritual and the transformative dimensions of aesthetics, emphasizing the integration of aesthetics with broader philosophical and religious traditions. So, from the Indian concept, if you will see that aesthetics is not just for mere pleasure, it in fact had higher aims, like that of spiritual transformations, or realizing the ultimate, or enjoying that ultimate bliss. So, it's not just for the momentary pleasure that we are creating and appreciating the work of art. In fact, from the Indian concept, and which makes it distinct from the Western context, is that it emphasizes the spiritual and the transformative dimensions of aesthetics. So, one notable text where that extensively discusses Saundarya Shastra is Natya Shastra. While primarily focusing upon the performing arts, the Natya Shastra also touches upon various aspects of aesthetics, including the depiction of beauty, the emotional impact of artistic expressions, and the role of artists in creating the aesthetic experience. The Abhinav Bharati by Abhinav Gupta, which is a commentary on Natya Shastra, that also provides, an extensive insight into the philosophical and aesthetic dimensions of Indian performing arts. So moreover, the concept of beauty and aesthetic is intertwined with, broader philosophical and spiritual tradition in India. For example, in Advait tradition, the ultimate reality of Brahman is considered to be the nature of supreme beauty. The concept of Anand or bliss in Vedantic philosophy is closely associated with aesthetic experiences and the perception of the divine beauty. And that's where you can see, there are some of these differences between the Indian and the Western concept that you can see here, where it's not just for the momentary pleasure. In fact, it is considered in Vedant philosophy to be that of Anand or bliss, where you experience that kind of ultimate reality, and it is seen as equivalent to that experience. So with that, we come to our end of this lecture on aesthetic, or introduction to aesthetics as you may call it, and we will continue this series in our next lectures. I hope it was beneficial and I hope it was interesting to all of you. So see you in the next lecture. Thank you.